I think about 80% of potential home buyers would want to use a platform like ours.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Housing Insiders, the podcast for founders, builders, lenders, and regulators, and anyone who believes that everyone should be well housed. I'm Jonathan Lawless.
And I'm Jeremy Potter. On Housing Insiders, we're bringing you the smart conversations with people in the know, combined with actionable ideas that you won't hear anywhere else.
Today's episode, we're going to cover something that's pretty important, and it's gotten a lot of conversation. In fact, there was a Housing Wire article, I think, just a day or two ago about this particular topic, but it's sort of about what's happening with startups, particularly in the real estate and real estate agent segment, which we've been saying for years needs to be disrupted. And so that's today's conversation.
That's right. Our guest today is Arman Javaherian, the CEO and co-founder of Homa. So we're excited to talk to you and learn more about what AI is doing in the real estate sales, real estate agent space.
Arman, welcome. A little bit about your background. I'll just say this. You were a former senior director at a company that people should be familiar with. If they're not, they shouldn't be listening. There's a company called Zillow. It looks like you were responsible for creating the Zillow Premier Agent app, which is a pretty impressive app and product that's out there. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Arman.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I keep saying your name, Arman. We got to make sure we say it right. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. Arman, thank you.
Yeah, Arman's right. Although my two best friends from high school still call me Armin, and I let them get away with it. So I'm not used to that.
Well, thank you for being here. So obviously, we get a lot of questions about technology, emerging tech, AI on this show. We probably all get it in our regular life. So I guess we'll start there with what are you doing with AI in the agent space, and tell us what Homa actually does.
Yeah, so Homa is kind of a new way to buy a home. So what we do, it's kind of an alternative to the traditional real estate agent model. So when you're working with a traditional real estate agent, you typically are working with one person. You're kind of beholden to that person's schedule when you want to go to a showing or tour a house. And so if that person has many other kind of clients that they're handling, you're stuck kind of waiting on that person's schedule for when you can see them in person. When you're negotiating, you have that one person that's also trying to negotiate the deal for you. And then when you're in escrow, a lot of times that same agent is trying to do all the paperwork. And what we're saying is like a real agent isn't good at all three of those things. So when you use Homa, you search on it just like you would on Zillow or another portal. You find homes that you like. When you schedule a tour, we have a network of hundreds of real estate agents in Florida. We're live in Florida right now. And we basically ping those agents just like Uber. The first agent that accepts that showing request, they go and they schedule it with the seller side. And once it's confirmed, they let us know. And then we ping the buyer, letting them know that it's confirmed. And then they go out in person to see the property with that showing agent. We pay these showing agents hourly for that service. And then when the buyer is ready to actually move forward on the property and put an offer in, then we have our in-house licensed agent jump on a call with them, talk about offer strategy, offer price. And that person's job is literally just negotiating all day long with listing agents. They don't do showings. They don't do anything else. So we're really trying to find the best person for each role. And then when the house is in escrow, as a result, we will put a transaction coordinator on the file to help make sure that everything is going smoothly, because we only get paid if the buyer closes on the deal. And by doing it this way, what we're enabling is the ability for us to basically give back the majority of the buyer's agent commission to the buyer. So we charge a 1% fee with a minimum of $3,000 for the service. And so if a buyer is, let's say, buying a $1 million home, for example, and the seller is offering a 3% commission, we will basically take that $30,000 as the buyer's agent, and then we will keep $10,000, which is our 1%, and we will give back $20,000 to the buyer in that example. And obviously the buyers are very happy with that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like you're breaking down the parts of the process that the agent does, giving it to the right person. That costs a lot less than what an agent charges to do all of it. And ultimately the buyer wins. We've done a few episodes, and certainly during the NAR settlement, Jeremy and I have talked a lot about, and I kind of want to start with like the incumbents, right? Like the people that do this today have done it the same way for a very long time. Zillow, as you know, is sort of in some ways like leveraging technology to start disrupting that space. and it's been kind of undisruptible. I'm curious to kind of get your view as to why hasn't this happened. I mean, this leverages technology, but honestly, technology is not the core innovation here. Why hasn't this been done before?
It's a great question. I think when you look at Zillow or realtor.com or homes.com, these giant portals, they're not really our competitors. And it's hard for them to disrupt the process because they're not really in the process. They're in the process of helping people browse for homes, and then they pass that lead on to a real estate agent. So Zillow's goal, and it was the same when I was there, we didn't have any KPIs or goals to make sure people closed on their home successfully. The goals were all around engagement and how many getting people to be sent as a lead to the buyer's agent. That was it. And so you're never going to disrupt if you're only in like one small part of the funnel. And that's what we're doing differently. We're owning the entire funnel. And I think that's the only place you can disrupt it. And then the real competitors become the larger brokerages because we're a traditional brokerage, right? We have a brokerage license. We follow. We're part of the realtors organizations, NAR, all that stuff. And so we're just operating a little bit differently with a different kind of cost structure than like a Compass or a Coldwell Banker or these other traditional brokerages are. And again, the model with a traditional brokerage is that, in most cases, the real estate agent or the team of agents are bringing the leads, and the brokerage makes like usually a minority percentage of that cut. So they're also stuck in that way because they can't actually, disrupt the whole process. They're only making a small cut themselves, especially Compass, right? I think there were some agent teams are being brought over, and Compass is getting like a 10% split, maybe, or 20% split. So you can't really disrupt when your amount is that small.
So that's a useful clarity. So you're not considering it a SaaS solution that's meant to expand across multiple brokerages. Your idea is like keep it to your own brokerage as your own brokerage
Uh,
process, and then compete against it. That's helpful.
that's our model, and it's a much harder model. It's much more highly regulated. It's like the reason why Zillow blew up was because it could scale so quickly, so vastly. But that same reason why it would scale so quickly also meant that it wasn't part of the full transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can't actually disrupt the model. And so that's what we're doing differently.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? The model's value and then the cost or the compensation, because we tend to see a lot of conversations around agent representation kind of weave their way between what the agent actually does, the tasks, the work, and the value of that work. And commission, as John mentioned, has been such a headline thanks to the NAR settlement and others. But you hear it a lot from consumers, right? You hear this tension, this battle between why do real estate agents make so much money? And also real estate agents being like, if you only knew, we're this valuable. Can you talk a little bit about the way that you've approached the value that you deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you think about a traditional real estate agent, they're doing maybe 5 to 10 transactions a year. And that's usually like a good agent, right? They're doing 5 to 10 transactions a year. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that. We don't debate that. We see all the hard work firsthand. We're doing all the same things, all the same tasks. But I think, as a result of the traditional model, they're only able to do 5 to 10 transactions a year. Our goal with our in-house agents is can they do 200 transactions a year?
Mm-hmm.
And so for them, they're actually making more than a traditional agent would, but they're doing way, 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 way more transactions for us. And it allows us to kind of flip the cost structure on its head a bit.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, so I was trying to think like there's an analogy in the mortgage space around appraisals. Jeremy and I often talk about how many licensed individuals need to be a part of a real estate transaction. The appraiser is another one. The value of an appraiser is somebody who's good at assessing values. It's not that he can drive out to the location. And so we've started to see these models where almost to your example, like you have sort of an Uber where somebody goes and takes photographs, takes drone footage, whatever it is of the property. And then the appraiser whose real value is to make an assessment of the value can just sit there on a computer, look at the pictures and do many more of them versus having like be in a car driving around. So it's kind of an interesting kind of comparison. Part of what you're pitching on Homa, and maybe you're doing this just because it's the sexiest thing in tech right now, is to pitch AI and the role of AI. Can you talk a little bit about does AI enable this to happen? Does it help it happen? How are you thinking about leveraging AI in this process?
Right now, we leverage AI mainly to help people come up with the right offer price, the right comps, the right way to approach it. We have the AI that powers our chatbot, which is very finely tuned and trained on specifically Florida real estate law and regulations. And so they ask it questions. They've asked thousands of questions of our AI chatbot already, our buyers. So it really helps in those situations. It also helps kind of analyze disclosures and inspection reports. And a lot of these things ChatGPT does today. So I think realtor.com announced a research a month ago or a couple months ago that said 82% of home buyers are using AI in some way in their home search, which is a huge, I don't know if it's that high, but definitely probably at least 50% of folks are doing it. And so what are they doing? They're uploading their purchase contract to ChatGPT. They're uploading the inspection report. They're asking questions. They're saying, what is a contingency? What is standard? All these things that I think traditional real estate agents would do. And so it does cut down on a lot of those aspects of the process. But the AI as it is right now, it's not replacing the important human licensed work that needs to be done. So the showings have to be done by a licensed agent, human that's there in person, that's accompanying the home buyer. The negotiations have to be done by a licensed human agent. No listing agent is going to want to be negotiating with an AI. I can tell you that for sure. And then also during even the one place that probably we could leverage AI even more is on the transaction coordination side when it's in escrow. But even that, it's like that's probably a while away because there's so many, like we're seeing for thousands of unique use cases and situations that come up when there's like this document needs to be updated and that needs to happen, and you have to coordinate and get on a call with the title and the lender and the inspector, and like how do you leverage this and how many credits do you have that the mortgage lender is going to approve or not approve, and there's a lot of that stuff so that we're not going to try and use AI to fix.
We just saw a video, John and I were trading it, I think, back and forth, where celebrity agent Ryan Serhant said that he had a very high dollar value, $50 million listing or whatever. And both sides of the transaction at the final step asked ChatGPT, am I paying the right amount? Am I listing the right amount? They both, on both sides of his deal, asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told each of them that they could do better. So told the seller, you should be getting more for this, and told the buyer, you should be paying less for this on the same property address, on the same deal. And so I'm curious, one of the things that I like about what you just said is there's a long history in tech of empowering experts with the best tech. That is actually a well-worn path to success. Give experts the best tech and let them become more efficient. And then it kind of trickles down to what I would call like the mass market or everybody else. Are the people behind Homa expert negotiators? Are you looking for certain characteristics? Are you recruiting agents to come in? You said they make more, but I'm curious, like the type of person that is best on the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. The in-house agents that we have, we bring them in specifically because of their negotiation skills. So that is the one thing they're doing there. What you want when you're negotiating. There's a lot of aspects to it, but first and foremost, you just want to hire people that love being on the phone. So who are those people? They're the extroverts. They're the ones that are constantly talking and constantly wanting to make deals and go back and forth. You don't want to hire someone that's an introvert. I'm an introvert. I'm not going to be the best negotiator on the deal because I'm always in my head. I'm going to be trying to avoid the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you want to have people that love and are driven toward that phone call. And so that's kind of the first thing that we look for. And then also we look at their transaction history, and then we try them out. We bring them on board. We see how it goes. We gauge from the buyers like what their experience was. We look at where they ended up on the deal. And ultimately the goal is like make sure the home buyers are happy. One of the things I loved when I was at Zillow, our North Star was always, hey, make sure the consumer is happy. And it's the same thing we have in Homa. The North Star is always making sure the home buyer is happy.
Hey, John, you know what this makes me think of? Dan Gilbert, and I have a try to avoid using my own personal experience all the time, but that's the experience we have. So, Dan Gilbert at Quicken Loans saw the opportunity for a call center for refinance and put all of the mortgage expertise in one room on a couple of floors of a building and said, get on the phone and do what you do best, all centralized with technology. And John, this kind of makes me think that that's the buyer's agent future is get on that headset, get, high energy call center type of environment and go get the best deal. Go do what you do best. And it reminds me a lot actually of what I heard of the early days of, direct to consumer refi on the mortgage side. That's a really interesting way to think about the future of the buyer's agent.
Yeah, I love that, Armand. That's high praise. You're going to be the rocket of mortgage or real estate
Buyer's
brokerages.
agent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just like they bought Redfin, maybe one day we'll buy Zillow.
Yeah. Something I think a lot about, Armand, and the question I often ask myself is like, is the challenge of disrupting the real estate industry a challenge of technology or better process? Or is it something else? And I often think like we've seen a lot of great technology, we've seen a lot of great ideas in the brokerage space and other spaces, and agents are still around. So like there's got to be something else that's kind of that protects their position in the industry. And your solution, by the way, if I were living in Florida and looking for a home, I would much rather pay 1% than 3% and get a service like yours than go out and try to find an agent. Unfortunately, and I think the challenge for most consumers is they just don't know your solution exists, but they do know that their brother-in-law is on as an agent, or 5 people at the school's PTA are agents. And so they often just kind of default to the picture of the person that they're seeing in mailers constantly versus like really finding the best way to go about it. I've suspected for a long time that the moat that agents have is just the pure volume of them and their marketing prowess, which probably accounts for a lot of their cost. It's just really hard to overcome. Do you agree with that? And like, how do you overcome the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of agents running around Florida trying to get clients that really should be using you?
I think you're absolutely right that it's an awareness issue. So, and that's what we're working on. That's what our goal is, to grow our awareness, grow our brand recognition. That's why I'm joining podcasts like this, because I think it's important for like all your audience to know that about this. Even if industry people, like mortgage folks, et cetera, a lot of times people approach a mortgage officer, a loan officer, before they even are ready to get a real estate agent. And so it's a great opportunity for that mortgage professional to actually recommend Homa, because we can help save those buyers a lot of money. And that money is things that they can use to buy down their rate. A lot of our buyers take that extra $10,000, $20,000 and they just buy down their rate, especially in this market. So it makes it more likely that the home is going to close. It makes it more likely that they can actually be successful. I think that's one aspect to it. But I think the larger question around why hasn't this changed? I think there's a lot of just atrophy, and there's a lot of just the nature of how the world works. It's been like this for 50 years. So it's going to take time for people to learn about new opportunities, new ways. There's 2 million licensed real estate agents out there. They don't all have deals, but that's a lot of people to kind of compete with from a brand perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but I think we saw a lot of startups or real estate concepts that felt they could attack the establishment through what had come to be termed a discount commission structure, right? That 1%. I do like the getting the money back in the consumer's pocket, but also doing it in a way that doesn't throw off, let's say, the typical offer to the typical seller's agent, right? So 3% stays 3%. It just goes back into the customer's pocket instead of trying to go out there and convince what, in some markets are gatekeepers for how this industry is going to evolve or change. And instead, it's like, no, we'll just use what's there. I'm curious, as you've launched Homa and as you've felt, the go to market and starting to get those deals coming through, especially like you said in Florida, what kind of pushback, if any, have you heard? Is there? What have you experienced from the folks that John's talking about, the establishment?
We haven't experienced much because, again, our model is not a new model. Like discount brokers have existed. Redfin had a version of this back in the day, I think, as well. So I don't think we're not doing anything outside the norm, and that's by design, right? We want to be able to try and grow and change the industry as being part of the industry. I think there's a lot of startups that came up that tried to go against like not being a traditional brokerage, not being like part of the traditional model. And I think that's very difficult. For us, we're set up just like Compass is. So if Compass tries to change the rules of the game for us, it's going to change it for Compass as well. And so I think Compass, I'm sure they're still working day and night trying to figure out how to leverage AI internally and make AI work and have AI be consumer facing as much as possible. So I don't think they're going to try and change or go out after us. And then the listing agents, they're making their 3% or whatever their commission is. They just want the deal to close successfully. And when we explain to them, like, hey, listen, our buyers are ready to go, they're much more tech savvy. There are people that are much more, they like to be in charge of the process themselves. They're much more likely to close, which is true. I think they love that. And so we have the whole integrated experience. We have a dedicated, transaction coordinator, making sure everything closes seamlessly. So the listing agent so far, I really like the model.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the awareness point that you brought. And you mentioned like mortgage brokers and like, a loan officer, like who, should ostensibly want to send you a lead because it's going to save their client some money. And then I think about, I always start a sentence with if I were a mortgage broker, and I actually am now. So, so I can't say that anymore. So as a mortgage broker, what mortgage brokers deal with is this sort of, I get all my leads from a real estate agent, and real estate agent is sort of relying on that from brokers. And so for a broker to then instead say, I'm going to refer my client to a new service versus the list of real estate brokers that I've sort of been spending my entire career kind of curating, like they expect leads from me, I expect leads from them. And that's just, again, it's just a part of this awareness cycle and kind of closed door protectionist industry that we have. So I just say all of that as a precursor to ask you the question of like, what's the strategy around awareness? Like, is it like, what are you finding is effective? Is it Google ads? Is it, you said you're getting a more tech savvy clientele. Is it like ChatGPT is starting to refer people to you as a cheaper way to buy? Anyway, like help me think through what the strategy is on awareness.
Yeah, I think we invest a lot in our AEO. So like answer engine optimization for ChatGPT and Gemini, and others to kind of refer folks to us. And we're seeing good success there. I think additionally, what's worked really well for us is just press. We were featured in the New York Post. We were featured in Forbes, Business Insider, Fox Business National ran a segment on us. All the local, like 50 different local TV stations, ran segments on us. And I think that's been really successful for us, like getting the
Oh,
word
that's
out.
awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to kind of break through, but I think about homes.com a lot. So homes.com invested 300 million to go against Zillow in the past however many few years. And they've gotten a lot of heat for that investment because it ultimately failed, right? CoStar is reducing that investment and strategically pivoting. The reason why it failed is because homes.com didn't have anything different than Zillow. There was no differentiation. And in fact, I would argue that the product is actually worse from a UX perspective and a design perspective, being someone that like leads product and design teams. It's not, you can't just throw money at the problem. You have to have a fundamentally better product, better differentiation. Homa, we're very differentiated, obviously. Like if you're looking at Zillow and you're looking at Homa, well, Zillow is just going to transfer you to some buyer's agent, and that buyer's agent is going to ask you to sign a contract for 3%. For us, we're like, no, no, no. Every house you look at Homa, we have a little badge that tells you potentially how much money you're going to get back. And so you feel, Homa feels like you're making money by using it. And I think that's the difference psychologically for folks.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really like the marketing and direct to consumer space. I've liked it for a long time. I'm back in it now.
It's hard. It's very, very, very hard.
It is, and it's intimidating, and it keeps a lot of people from taking a really powerful technology and they make it B2B, or they try to make it paid for by some professional, either the lender, the servicer, the title agent. Like they try that just because they're so intimidated by just delivering it to the consumer. And so I am kind of curious, as you talk about this space, like you did the marketing, you mentioned all the places. How do you see expansion state by state? You mentioned Florida. We talked a little bit before we started recording about Texas and California, right? The big high volume states, the big transaction states. Do you see this as the way everybody's going to behave on the buy side someday? Or do you see it as we know who our customer is and our customer is a part of the overall market? How have you seen so far the fit with the people who are using and buying houses on Homa so far?
Yeah, I think about 80% of potential home buyers would want to use a platform like ours. there's about 20% that we're seeing that still want the hand-holding of one agent that they've known for years, and they're willing to pay that 2% premium for that person. That's great for them, but I think the vast majority of folks don't want that. And especially like what we hear about Homa is not just that they're saving money, but it's a better experience. And I think that is like, I think we could charge 3% and still get as many clients, but that's not aligned with our mission. And so I think that's one part of it. I'll also say on the product side, what's important when you're doing direct to consumer is that you have to have a product that is so well designed and has such a well experience, not just on the UI, but overall every human touch point, every handoff, because consumers are very, very fickle. And especially in something like real estate where there is no network effect. So, a consumer goes and buys a house, then they are off the market for 5 years and then they come, or 7 years, and then they come back again. Like they're not beholden to any platform, right? There's nothing keeping them there. So you have to constantly reacquire consumers. So the only way to do that is by having the product itself stand out. And then right now we're getting a lot of word of mouth referrals from our existing users, which has been, it's a good testament to that.
Agreed. I just had one quick follow up. So you mentioned like how much the experience matters, and I think that friction and you mentioned it earlier, the transaction coordinator piece of the role. How many different people are involved? All the different professionals that are involved, but also there's a buyer and a seller, and there's always going to be some like human moments that we can't get rid of. But it sounds like what you're saying is there is coming a smoothing out when you have technology talking to technology. So we talked earlier about not having a listing agent wanting to talk to AI, but there are pieces, it sounds like, where if you get that experience down, you'll have, I think what you're saying is AI talking to AI on the pieces it can do and smoothing out a lot of the stuff that's still kind of tricky today. Do you get a sense that there will be a time when, we have agent talking to agent, AI agent, excuse me, I should be very clear on this, not real estate agent talking to real estate agent, agentic AI talking to agentic AI. And how far are we from that, do you think?
Well, I think it depends on the use case. So one of the things I like about real estate is that it's a licensed industry. So you have to have a license to do some of these things. You can't just have an AI or have someone in the Philippines be negotiating for these deals. You have to have an actual or else you're practicing you're practicing law basically without a license. So I actually like that because it does allow us to keep that human element for the most expensive transaction of someone's life, which is their home purchase. But in the future, there may be opportunities or areas where, yeah, you have, instead of having so many real estate firms have these virtual assistants in the Philippines or in other offshore, replacing those with AI talking to AI. I think that can happen. Maybe they're helping coordinate on some part of the transaction or helping coordinate with the showing or helping to do all these other things. I think that can happen. But the core, negotiating AI versus AI, I don't think that will happen in the near future, unless they change the laws, which I doubt anyone is going to allow. Our goal is the rest of the world. The average commission, the total commission, is around 2 to 3%. And so our goal is to be able to say, hey, it's 1% on the buy side, it's 1% on the sell side. And by doing that, we think it'll not only help buyers, but it'll open up volume in the real estate space. I think there's a lot of sellers that don't want to sell their home because they see that 6% tax as something that's very, very costly. And so it keeps them off the market as well. So if that 6% is actually 2% or even less, then I think the volume and the liquidity in the market will also increase, which would benefit everyone.
Arman, you said so many fascinating things. There's one thing that really jumped out at me, and before I dig into it, I would just take a quick second to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll come back to this one point. If you've been following the news, you'll see that Built just made a major announcement. Built has just launched a new version of its award-winning credit card, the Built Card 2.0. Not only does the new card let people earn points on rent without a transaction fee, but it now allows borrowers to earn points on their mortgage. Two things that are important to know. First, you'll never pay a transaction fee when you pay your rent or mortgage on the card, but you're only going to earn points if you use the card on other things. In fact, if you spend as much on other things as you do on your mortgage or rent, you'll actually get 1.25 points for every dollar on your mortgage and rent. Second, and important for us in the mortgage industry, is that the card technically functions like a debit card when it's used to make mortgage or rent payments. So it never uses a credit line. It's like paying with ACH, but earning points. The demand for the new card is off the charts. And that's because for most people, it offers the most amount of value of any card in the industry. And also, don't forget, the card is only a small part of what Built offers. Built manages payments for 1 in 4 apartment buildings and is now connecting with mortgage servicers like UWM to take mortgage payments. For all of these renters and owners, they'll earn points on every payment. And for all of our members, whether or not they have the card, they'll have access to benefits and rewards at tens of thousands of merchants in their neighborhood, like restaurants, fitness centers, pharmacies, and more. So, Armand, the one point that you said that is really fascinating to me, and it actually has my brain spinning a little bit here, is you said that you could probably charge 3% and still have the same number of satisfied clients. And the reason that kind of stood out to me is that I think for a lot of sellers and buyers, because the cost of realtors is sort of just baked into the transaction. Now, some people are aware of that, and you become more painfully aware of that, especially as a seller, when the transaction closes and you see the dollar signs that are being sent to the agent. But most people going into the process have no fucking idea, and I think that's the reason it persists. Is like, you just don't really know. Like, this guy's showing me homes for free. Awesome. I didn't know he's getting 3%. He's got a nice car and he shows me the homes I like. So your point about that you're actually creating a better experience is one that I think, even beyond the cost savings, could be one that truly has the potential to disrupt. It's like that feature that homes could add that Zillow doesn't have. Like, what is the thing that's going to differentiate it? So I wanted to dig into that a little bit, because one of the things I often hear from people talking about the value of a real estate agent is the shoulder to cry on person to actually help you get comfortable with the decision that you're making, especially for first-time home buyers. Does your experience kind of retain some of that feel? Like, if I have a different agent showing me every home I look at every time I go out to look for homes, I don't have that one person who I sort of build rapport and trust, and sort of the therapeutic relationship that a lot of people have with their agents, which I think is why they really value their agent. I could be wrong, but anyway, how do you think about that aspect of the transaction?
Yeah, I think everyone's different. What we hear from our home buyers is they actually really enjoy meeting different local agents, because each local agent, let's say they have 5 different showings in one day, we will maybe connect them with 5 different showing agents. Each of those agents is a local agent. They can ask them questions about the neighborhood, about the school district, about the buildings, about the street, and they get a different perspective from each one. And they really value that. And then meanwhile, we're always there for them if they know that, for example, me and my team and our in-house agent are always there if they're curious about a property, if they're trying to discuss, documents or disclosures about a property. So they know that that base is still there, and they trust us, and we're grateful for that trust. But you're right, there is a therapeutic nature to it. And that's where I think the 20% of the home buyers that need that will still use a traditional agent.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the things that we try to think about here is also the speed of change and how much the industry can take, how much, like you said, the market can take. But it seems like what we've all been talking about here is that people are ready. People are ready for the change. It's actually the industry side that might not be. And I'm curious, you've mentioned the cost of the transaction. We've talked about the experience. Is there anything else that you've identified that your team's working on that needs to change outside of the 1% or putting money back in my pocket and, relying on the better negotiator, the sharpshooter version, or whatever the special ops version of a negotiator is for my buyer's agent? What else is on your roadmap? What else have you identified in the transaction that you said, we haven't talked about this, but this needs to change as well?
Yeah, there's a lot that we're working on, and I can't divulge that stuff. We're still kind of a nascent startup trying to make our way in the space. But what I will say is that even what we have now is disruptive. It can be disruptive. And I think a lot of traditional brokerages out there, they're also looking for ways to disrupt themselves and to improve their processes. And so I welcome that. The question is, can they do it in a way to give back that commission? And I think the challenge there is that it's the brokerage model. The brokerage model where the brokerage itself is making a smaller percentage of the commission. The agents are the ones that take the majority of that commission, and brokerages are going to be very beholden to those agents. It's going to be really hard for them to basically tell their existing agents that have all the clients, oh no, you're going to take a smaller cut of that commission, or hey, where the total pie, instead of being 3%, is now 2% or 1%. That's going to be very hard to sell. And so because that's a very hard sell, it disincentivizes these brokerages from actually trying to disrupt themselves, because the model itself needs to change, I think. I think that's a bigger challenge for them.
This is also something that traditional brokerages aren't well equipped to pivot to. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is like, even if they wanted to, it's just not the right structure for them. So you have to come in net new rather
You
than.
kind of have to, yes. Yeah. And that's going to be the same situation across every industry. All these AI companies, where they're coming in, it's not just with new technology, it's usually with a new model and a new cost structure. And those two things are way more disruptive than any technology. The technology is enabling that. But if you think about this in any industry right now, you have all these incumbents, you have all these enterprise companies, and their whole structure is based around a certain human labor model. Then it's going to be really hard to change that until you change the underlying cost structure.
That's right. I mean, using taxis as the incumbent and Uber as the disruptor is a perfect example of that. Taxis, the medallion system wasn't likely to invent Uber. It really had to come from somebody who could really rethink the cost structure the way that you guys have. Just real quick on the cost structure. So the model that you described is sort of like you're breaking it into pieces, the various activities realtors are doing. Now, I know that sometimes you have clients that want to see 50 homes and don't end up buying, and so there's a lot of uncertainty on the cost side there. And then I think the other big uncertainty that you have, at least as you scale and move forward, is sort of your customer acquisition costs. Are those kind of like how you're thinking about balancing the structure in the system? Because you can get your customer acquisition costs low enough, and people aren't looking at 50 homes every time and negotiating 12 deals and them falling through. It seems like this could be an extremely profitable model, even though you're lowering the rate of commissions.
Yeah, that's what we think, and we're still trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure out our cost structure. We're still an early, young seed company, and so for our goal with our investors is like, let's figure out what that structure could look like, and that's why we're like, for example, we're not limiting the showings. And yes, we have had buyers that have gone to 20 or 30 showings and they didn't do anything with it, and that was a huge suck. But then on the flip side, we've had buyers that already knew they want to make an offer on the street down the house. They came in 0 showings and they put an offer in immediately, and that was great. So it's about like, what does the overall average look like? And I don't want to limit folks to see homes, because I think that's one of the problems with the traditional model, is that consumers and home buyers basically, because they don't want to bother the real estate agent, they feel guilty. And so they will limit the number of homes that they ask the agent to see. We see that, we hear that. With us, we tell them like, hey, don't worry about it. These are just showing agents that are doing this on the side. You can, see as many as you want. And then you see them like, oh my God, really? I can just go to as many houses as I want. And as a result, they find a home that they love, that they maybe otherwise wouldn't have thought they loved. And so there's a whole psychological aspect to that, that I think could be working in our favor as well. We don't know yet. It's still early, but we're experimenting with different things.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. That made me think of, as we wind up here, I just had a couple more questions, but one was first-time home buyers versus experienced home buyers. Have you seen any trends at Homa yet around how first-time home buyers use your tools and your solution versus how more experienced, maybe my second home or my third home experience? Any lessons learned yet?
Yeah, I think if you look at the market overall, about 70% of home buyers are repeat home buyers, 30% are first-time home buyers. For us, it's skewed a little bit higher. We're about 80% are repeat home buyers, 20% are first-time home buyers. And in that repeat home buyer segment, there's probably a quarter of them that are real estate investors. So people that are doing fix and flips, or they're looking for income Airbnb properties, and they have less of a need for agents than anyone. So you can imagine they're kind of value and their value proposition is very different. But for first-time homebuyers, yeah, they take more handholding, but they are motivated financially way more than anyone else. Because the difference between like an average first-time homebuyer's down payment is 6%. And so if 3% of it is going to a buyer's agent commission, if they can get back 2%, that's a third of their down payment that they're getting back now that can help with their closing costs. A lot of first time home buyers don't know that there's 3 to 4% in closing costs on a house. And I have to tell them that. And they're like, wait, what do you mean? There's more I have to pay? And like, yeah, there's more.
Yeah.
And then when I tell them like you can make that a lot of that money back as a credit, then it really opens their eyes. So it is a little bit more handholding, but they are a little bit more driven financially.
It's a really interesting way of sort of changing what the experiential, quick, easy, smart certainly appeals to repeat buyers. The cost value on the first time home buyers, if they're aware of it, is a much more meaningful thing, likely for first time buyers. That's really interesting. Let me ask. So we have a bunch of different types of people that listen to the show. I sit here in Washington D.C., so I think about policy a lot. Are there any policies or restrictions or things that exist as you kind of look across the environment that you think, boy, would it be nice if that particular restriction could change, either on maybe interested party contributions on the lending side or anything that becomes a constraint to the type of disruption that you're looking to do?
I think what's happening right now with this talk of private listings, private networks, with Zillow's Preview and Compass, I think all of that just does a disservice to consumers. Because what the worst thing that could happen in the industry is a consumer feeling like they have to go to multiple websites to find the inventory of homes. Because like what we know in product and user experience is you add friction, people just they move back, they move away, they just get frustrated and they just stop the whole thing and they say like buying a home is already frustrating. The financing, finding the home, the deals, the emotional baggage that comes with it. If you add even more to that, I think that hurts everyone. It'll hurt and this is why like Compass, like what they're doing, what they tried to do, it's very short-sighted because if they succeed, that means every brokerage will go and come up with their own private network, and that's just going to hurt overall volume tremendously. And I think like people that make those kind of decisions haphazardly, they don't understand how human psychology and how product and user experience work.
Yeah, you're spot on. There isn't a track record of like going against transparency. There isn't a real track record of reversing transparency working. It seems to be that all of the trends, tech included, is more transparency, more ability to
More
negotiate in the
ability,
marketplace.
and not just ability, not just transparency. It's just friction. Just think about friction. If you add friction to any workflow, it will make people do it less, especially nowadays with they're comparing this to Instagram and AI and everything that's so like easy and fast and everyone's used to something fast. You add friction to any workflow, you add friction to the home buying process, less people are going to buy homes. It's like that is a full stop easy thing to say. And so that's the lens they should look at all of this through.
We haven't tackled this issue of pocket listings yet on the podcast, and it's one with I guess it was it Zillow that recently sort of stopped trying to sue Compass and has decided to kind of okay, we'll do the same thing. This seems really harmful, and it seems like a topic that we should spend time on. I'm not sure where the solution comes from, and in fact, I read an article recently that these homes are actually selling for 1.7% more than if they were listed the normal way. I call BS on that, but
Yeah, there's a lot of data. There's actually way more data saying the opposite.
is
Is
that
if when
right?
you hide these properties, the seller actually loses. And Zillow's done a lot of research on this. Actually, I think Northwest MLS did a bunch of research on it. There's a bunch of research that say the opposite.
That's a troubling trend. Let me ask another version of the regulatory question. Again, we have builders, lenders, others that are listening to the podcast. Are there partnerships that you would sort of put an announcement out, like if you're a lender or if you're a builder, or like who are the partners that you would really want to engage more broadly in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think real estate investors are ones that like those folks that are really keen in the market. They really value our product because they're able to go in, they're able to see homes. We have like physical showings, virtual showings that we can do, and they can move quickly and they save that money. That 2% for them is the difference between something being profitable and not being profitable. I think that's one group. And then yeah, lenders, if a lender has a home buyer, you previously mentioned that lenders have relationships with real estate agents. I think conversely, a lot of lenders are very scared that their home buyers will find a real estate agent that will actually just take them away from their client.
That's right.
And I think that's definitely something that is equal concern for them. And so I think there's an opportunity there as well for lenders to recommend folks to us.
That's a great point.
So I have a goofy question, but I just have to ask. There's a professional golfer, Max Homa. Have you considered, or will you be considering a sponsorship for Max Homa? I feel like I can't, it's just so natural. Like
Yeah, I've considered it. We don't have the money yet.
Okay.
And my guess is he's not cheap. So,
yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good
but maybe
point.
I need to go find out where he lives and make friends with him and then give him some equity instead.
Well, if anyone's listening to this who has a personal connection to Max Homa, let us know.
Yeah, love that.
Well, it's probably a great way to end the episode. Arman, first of all, I'm so grateful that you were able to join and record today. It's a fascinating company. I really like how you think about your value proposition, and I think you're in the right place at the right time, which is just an industry that's ripe for disruption. So it's just great to have you on.
Thank you both. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We did too.
Perfect. That does it for today's episode. As usual, I'll ask anybody who's listening in if you have thoughts or questions to email us at podcast@thehousinginsiders.com. And please try as much as you can to comment, review, ask questions on the various podcast platforms where we are.
And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and share our episodes so that we can keep making more Housing Insiders episodes for you. And thanks, as always, to Keenan Chen for our music.